Eduardo adjusted his tie in front of the mirror at the restaurant. The dinner that evening was nothing short of remarkable. An opportunity to show Laura, his girlfriend, just how much he values their relationship. With a confident smile, he made his way to the quiet table, catching Laura's gaze, who appeared breathtaking in her blue dress. The restaurant, illuminated by warm and elegant lighting, radiated an air of sophistication and exclusivity. Eduardo positioned himself opposite her, lifting his glass in a toast while the sommelier elegantly poured a remarkable bottle of wine for him. Everything seemed perfect, as if life was finally coming together after months of uncertainty following the divorce. Laura represented his new beginning, graceful, serene, and completely detached from the chaos of his past. The conversation flowed smoothly, marked by warm smiles and subtle, meaningful looks. In an instant, everything changed. Eduardo looked up to signal the waiter, but his eyes fell upon something that left him completely paralyzed. A brief distance away stood Camila, his ex-wife. She slipped into a waitress uniform, the apron barely managing to cover her distinctly rounded belly. She was anticipating. Eduardo found himself reflecting on the series of events that had brought him to this point. He remembered that after the divorce, Camila had rejected any financial help, resolutely expressing her wish to rebuild her life independently. Yet, observing her commitment throughout her pregnancy eased his sense of guilt. The air hung heavy and stifling. Eduardo felt his heart pounding as his grip on the table grew firmer. What was she doing in that location? What might have prompted her to accept a position as a waitress in such an establishment? Yet, even more disconcerting, who was that child he expected? Laura, unaware of the turmoil stirring inside Eduardo, continued speaking until she noticed his gaze, lost and unfocused. "Is everything all right?" she asked with a hint of worry, following the direction of his gaze. Camila, sensing the eyes on her, quickly turned and discreetly made her exit through a side door. Eduardo, struggling to find the right expression, could only whisper something that was difficult to understand. His mind wandered, exploring the vibrant scene he had just witnessed. In the 8 months after his divorce, he had implemented every strategy to move forward, shaping a life that left Camila behind. As he observed her with child, he couldn't help but reflect on whether that moment had transpired in the closing days of their relationship or shortly after. The dates seemed entirely out of sync, and that uncertainty added another level of confusion to his thoughts. "Do you know her?" Laura continued her pursuit, her intrigue intensifying. Eduardo shook his head, but his reply carried an air of hesitation. Laura's brow furrowed, but she opted not to explore further, redirecting the conversation to more comfortable topics while Eduardo fought to keep a semblance of normalcy. Yet, his mind was caught in a web of countless unanswered questions. As Laura recounted her weekend plans, Eduardo's mind wandered to the closing chapters of his marriage with Camila. The past months had proven to be quite difficult, marked by countless discussions and a divide that seemed impossible to bridge. She yearned for emotional support, but he, absorbed in his ambitions and endeavors, chose to disregard her needs. As the ink dried on the divorce papers, Eduardo experienced a profound sense of clarity, fully convinced that this choice was the best course for their futures. Now, facing that image of Camila pregnant brought to the surface buried guilt and doubts he would rather not confront. The evening stretched on, but Eduardo barely enjoyed the meal. As Laura spoke, he stole glances toward the side door where Camila had quietly exited, anxious for her return. However, she did not come back. As the final course came to an end, Laura rose to make her way to the bathroom, leaving him alone at the table. Eduardo took advantage of the moment and called over the nearest waiter. "Could you kindly inform me of the name of the waitress who was serving this section earlier?" he asked, striving to keep a casual air. The waiter looked at him, a hint of confusion flickering across his face. "Camila, your time here appears to be concluding. I find myself in a state of uncertainty, but it appears you've been present for quite a few months now." The name confirmed what he had long suspected, but hearing it uttered by someone else sent a knot tightening in his stomach. Camila had dedicated herself to that place for months, while he hadn't even thought about how she would manage after the divorce. Armed with his insights, Eduardo could not shake off the reality of what he had seen. The image of Camila, waiting and striving in that setting, remained in his mind as a persistent reminder of an unanswered reality. As Laura returned to the table, Eduardo had managed to regain some of his composure, but his mind was still caught in a whirlwind of chaos. As they left the restaurant, Eduardo tried to keep the conversation light and cheerful, but Laura couldn't shake the feeling that he was distracted. "Is everything genuinely okay?" she asked as they got comfortable in the car. "Indeed, I'm just so tired," he replied, avoiding her gaze. As the night enveloped the room, Laura succumbed to a peaceful sleep in her bed, while Eduardo remained alert, his gaze fixed on the ceiling above. Camila's expression, her noticeable belly, and her habit of avoiding his gaze lingered in his mind. After months of avoidance, he abruptly realized that the past he had fervently tried to flee was about to return with a force he had never expected. Eduardo awoke the next day, enveloped in a persistent and unsettling sense of anxiety that clung to him. He reclined in bed for hours, caught in a web of memories that time had not managed to diminish. As he savored his coffee in the kitchen, with Laura still deep in sleep, his mind kept wandering back to the image of Camila, working hard in that restaurant, her pregnancy evident. Her presence was disquieting, as if her mere existence had reopened a scar he thought had fully mended. He reflected on the beginnings of his relationship with Camila. In their youth, they overflowed with dreams and hope. Camila was an impassioned soul, exuding a vibrancy that illuminated every room she graced. She remained steadfast by his side as he built his business empire, setting aside her own aspirations to be his constant source of encouragement. As time went on, Eduardo began to change. His attention became wholly absorbed in his tasks, with late nights at the office turning into a common routine. Meals that were once shared have morphed into corporate events, while weekends that used to nurture relationships have become filled with calls and emails. The gap unfolded slowly, resembling a crack that expanded with the passage of time between them. Camila tried to draw him into a dialogue, to convey her sense of being overlooked, to communicate her desire for emotional support in the same way he depended on his professional help. Nonetheless, Eduardo always managed to uncover a justification. "This is for the future that awaits. I just need to wrap up this agreement. Before too long, we will discover ourselves with extra time at our disposal." Every broken promise built yet another wall that separated them further. The memory of their last exchange echoed in his thoughts. Camila cried, imploring him to listen, to understand the magnitude of what he was giving up by being so consumed by his career. Eduardo, fatigued and frustrated, replied to him with a cold edge in his tone. "If this doesn't align with your expectations, it may be wise to wrap up our conversation." He never expected her to be so affected, but the next day, Camila had packed her things and left. In that instant, the heaviness of his grief enveloped him, and he realized that she was no longer a part of his existence. As he returned to the moment, Eduardo reflected on the path that had brought them to this point. Camila, a figure who had once intertwined her existence with his, now remained as a faint whisper of a bygone era he longed to forget. Yet, observing her journey through pregnancy changed everything. Is it possible that he is his son? If it were true, why hadn't he brought it up to him? And if it weren't, then who could possibly claim the role of the father? The burden of remorse began to engulf him. He had spent the last few months building a new life alongside Laura, a figure who represented both stability and simplicity. Still, he could no longer ignore the reality that a part of his story was left unfinished. He pondered if he had been too focused on himself, assuming that Camila would cope effectively after the divorce, convinced she could progress just as he had. Eduardo realized that he could no longer sit idly by. A myriad of questions hovered, and an abundance of concepts awaited his understanding. Though some aspects of him feared the confrontation with the past, others recognized that genuine tranquility would remain out of reach until he addressed it. As he looked out the window, the memory of Camila's face emerged in his mind. And beside him, a decision began to take shape. He was determined to reveal the truth, no matter the anguish it could cause. Eduardo couldn't rid himself of the lingering thoughts of Camila. As the days passed, the haunting image of his pregnant ex-wife, now working as a waitress, clung to his thoughts, following him without respite. In the office, while navigating through contracts and engaging in meetings, his mind wandered to the past, lingering on the unresolved issues he had set aside. In the stillness of the night, as Laura sought to draw him into conversation, his responses were brief, devoid of any warmth. During that meeting, an uneasy feeling settled in him, a sense of duty he could not shake off. Finally, his curiosity triumphed over his reluctance. He decided to return to the restaurant where he had first noticed her, this time alone. He stood quietly before Laura. He realized he was ill-equipped to express the origin of his unease. He arrived before the throng, asking for a table that provided a clear view of the entrance. Disguising his attention on the device in his hand, he kept a watchful eye on the staff as they entered and exited the venue. After a fleeting instant, he glimpsed her presence. Camila walked in, expertly balancing a tray with the same serene composure she had always shown. Yet now her eyes revealed a fatigue that Eduardo did not remember seeing before. Her pregnancy was evident, as the uniform struggled to hide the undeniable curve of her belly. Eduardo felt a constriction in his stomach. He experienced a sense of hesitation regarding how to connect with her, feeling lost for words after such an extended separation. Nevertheless, he realized that he could not leave without revealing the truth. He stood motionless, patiently waiting as Camila approached a nearby table. With an air of casual indifference, he captured her gaze. "Camila," he spoke softly but with a commanding presence, and she halted, briefly frozen as if faced with a ghostly figure. Slowly, she turned to face him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Eduardo, what has led you to this place?" he asked with a tense inflection. "I wanted to see you," he said, his resolve unshaken. "It's time to engage in a dialogue." Camila stared at him, her face a canvas of shock, as she struggled to comprehend the astonishing words that filled the air between them. "I am working," he replied, then turned to leave. Nevertheless, Eduardo was resolute in his efforts to maintain the conversation. He insisted, "Just 5 minutes, not here after your shift. I guarantee it won't go beyond that limit." Camila looked at him with focused attention, considering his words thoughtfully. His expression carried an intriguing nuance that ignited her doubt. Finally, he exhaled deeply, yielding to the scolding. "I leave at 10, he said, then turned to continue with his work. Time seemed to stretch endlessly for Eduardo as he lingered in his car, stationed outside the restaurant. As the clock struck 10, he noticed Camila quietly exiting through the back door, wrapped in a graceful coat. He approached her with a sense of urgency, his heart racing in his chest. He conveyed his gratitude with heartfelt sincerity. Camila looked at him, her face reflecting a mix of fatigue and resignation. "I'm uncertain about your intentions here, Eduardo," he remarked, "but I lack the time for trivial matters. All I desire are solutions," he replied. "I need to comprehend how we reached this moment and if the child is truly mine." His last words escaped his lips in a soft murmur, yet they were enough to capture Camila's attention. "You should really listen," she said, arms crossed. "Because I won't be repeating myself." Camila fixed her gaze on him, her expression a mix of exhaustion and sternness. Eduardo, standing in front of her, felt the weight of her gaze. She had become a completely different person from the woman he once recognized. She carried an unmistakable essence, a change shaped by the years gone by and the burdens of her journey. He took a deep breath, working to keep his calm as he listened for her response. "The child is yours, Eduardo." He has at last let go of the weight, his tone firm, as if exhausted from clinging to the reality. "Nevertheless, do not expect that this indicates anything beyond what it is. I am entirely self-sufficient and require nothing from you." The impact of those words hit Eduardo with the force of a frigid breeze. He had pondered the possibility, but hearing it directly from Camila made the reality feel more tangible, more inescapable. "Why wasn't I informed sooner?" Her tone was filled with confusion, tinged with a touch of sadness. "We have a right to know, Camila. I have a right to be kept in the loop." She laughed, but there was no trace of happiness in it. It was a laugh laced with resentment, overflowing with exasperation. "Isn't that right? What are you trying to convey, Eduardo? Your absence was deeply felt in my times of need. And now you think you are entitled to something. I didn't come looking for you because I knew that all you would provide were mere justifications. I decided to proceed on my own, as it was the most suitable decision for both me and this child." Eduardo felt that Camila's words pierced through every wall of self-defense he had built. He felt confident in his accuracy in a way. Repeatedly, he placed his ambitions and professional goals before her. Yet, the fact that she had made such a profound decision without his input only intensified his feeling of disconnection from the life he had once embraced. "Camila, I acknowledge my mistakes," he stated, working to keep his composure. "I acknowledge my flaws as a partner, but this child embodies something truly special. He is my son as well. I long to be a part of his life, regardless of whether the timing is perfect." She watched him silently for a moment, as if she were evaluating the authenticity of his words. Finally, she released a gentle sigh and shifted her focus to another direction. "I find myself hesitant to place my trust in you, Eduardo. Not after everything that occurred. I have learned to prioritize my well-being, and I want to ensure this child does not go through what I faced with you." "Let me show you my evolution," Eduardo insisted. "While I don't imply that the journey will be easy, I am enthusiastic about taking the plunge. For the child, for ourselves, even if we never come together again." Camila conceded, yet a trace of uncertainty remained in her expression. He spoke gently, expressing his uncertainty about trust, yet acknowledging that he couldn't deny his son the chance to connect with his father. "Of course, Eduardo, this doesn't mean that I will provide you with another chance. Participation requires earning your place." Eduardo acknowledged the challenge presented to him with a determined nod. There was a great deal to uncover, both for Camila and for his own understanding. In that moment, under the gentle illumination of the streetlights, he felt a stirring within him, a realization that this could be the beginning of something new, something he was determined not to risk. The next day, Eduardo returned home, his mind burdened and uneasy. The conversation with Camila echoed in his thoughts, each word heavy with blame and disquieting truths. He grasped her reality, recognizing that he had failed her as a partner, and now it was his duty to show that he would not make the same mistakes as his father. As he wrestled with the tumult of events that had transpired, he was keenly conscious that another obstacle loomed ahead: Laura. Laura welcomed him with her characteristic friendly smile. In the kitchen, she immersed herself in the ritual of brewing coffee, oblivious to the storm of thoughts swirling in Eduardo's mind. "You arrived early today," she said gently, as she poured the liquid into 2 cups. "What was the progression of your day?" Eduardo took a moment to gather his thoughts before replying. He had been avoiding this conversation, yet he knew that the truth couldn't stay hidden indefinitely. Laura was anything but naive, and her growing preoccupation had not gone unnoticed. "We must discuss this," she finally declared, her tone serious. Laura placed the cup on the table, casting a fleeting look back at it. Her smile faded as she noticed the expression on Eduardo's face. "What appears to be the problem?" she asked, her worry clear. He took a deep breath, striving to organize his thoughts. "Yesterday, as we dined at the restaurant, I observed an individual named Camila." The mention of his ex-wife made Laura frown. She knew about the divorce, but Eduardo had said little about Camila, as if she were a completed narrative, neatly stored in the annals of the past. He asked, a trace of uncertainty in his voice, knowing she was working there and anticipating something. Eduardo continued, his tone tinged with discomfort. "Laura, that child is mine." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Laura looked at him, her eyes filled with astonishment and uncertainty. She seemed to measure her words with precision, as if wrestling with the truth of what she had just faced. "Are you suggesting that your ex-partner is anticipating a baby? Can you tell me more about yourself?" "Oh, so this is the moment you've chosen to uncover this?" Indeed, Eduardo replied, feeling the weight of the situation. He confided in me last night. I had no idea, Laura. All was shrouded in enigma until her arrival brightened my existence. Laura took a step back, crossing her arms over her chest. After months of dedication, she had nurtured a connection with Eduardo, convinced he had left his past behind. At this moment, all her earlier convictions regarding him began to falter. What consequences does this present for us? She asked, her voice filled with emotion. What will your subsequent action be? Eduardo conveyed his determination to actively participate in his son's life with unwavering resolve. This is an issue I cannot ignore, Laura. I am bound by a responsibility to complete. Her eyes reflected a mixture of sadness and disappointment as she looked at him. What about us? Where do I fit into this picture? Is everything now focused on Camila and her child? Laura, she tried to explain, this isn't about how I feel for you. Nevertheless, I cannot forsake my son. I believe you can understand this. Laura nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I'm uncertain about my ability, Eduardo. I feel unsure about my capacity to add value to this. Laura paused, her gaze betraying a profound inner turmoil. I need a moment to ponder. This doesn't align with the vision I had for our relationship. Without waiting for her reply, she left the room, leaving Eduardo to wrestle with his growing feeling of emptiness. She recognized that her decision would bring consequences, but she could never have foreseen the magnitude of the cost she would incur. Eduardo lingered alone in the kitchen, his eyes locked on the door that Laura had just exited. The home, once filled with warmth and comfort, now seemed cold and silent. Laura's reply caught her off guard, leaving her in a whirlwind of emotions. Yet she struggled to feel any bitterness towards her. He struggled to comprehend the full gravity of the situation, recognizing that it wouldn't be easy for her to accept the repercussions of his decision. The next day, while Eduardo was driving to the office, he couldn't help but reflect on whether he was indeed making the right decisions. On one hand, his commitment to Camila and the child was clear. He was her son, and he was determined not to become the absent father he had always feared he might be. There stood Laura, the woman with whom he had begun to build a new life, a life that now seemed on the verge of unraveling. Amidst the hustle of his workday, Eduardo withdrew to his office, craving a moment of solitude to contemplate and introspect. He retrieved his phone and, with a sense of instinct, dialed Camila's number. The exchange was brief. He sought to create an opportunity for them to engage in conversation later, when both would be in a more comfortable state of mind. Camila agreed, yet her voice held a trace of uncertainty. That evening, Eduardo returned to the restaurant where Camila worked, determined to engage with her in a more straightforward manner. Camila welcomed him outside the venue, her expression mirroring the fatigue that had been evident on his face since their first meeting. "What is it that you desire, Eduardo?" he asked, arms crossed, as if preparing for a confrontation. "I seek no discord," he declared, raising his hands in a sign of peace. "I just want to talk about the baby and see how we can handle this situation together." Camila sighed and nodded, though her demeanor stayed cautious. "All right, please feel free to express your ideas." Eduardo took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts before he started. "I recognize that I have disappointed you before, Camila. I acknowledge that I did not meet your expectations, and I truly regret that. This small being symbolizes my chance to set things straight, to demonstrate that I can evolve into a better person and a more devoted father. I want to be there with you for this." She looked at him with deep focus, considering his words thoughtfully. Finally, he spoke a word. "So, Eduardo, how do you plan to bring that to fruition?" "It's about a profound commitment to offering support. It's about being present, demonstrating dependability, and not disappearing when difficulties come up. I won't put this little one in a risky situation," he said, his sincerity surprising her. "I wish to show my commitment to you. While I don't expect you to trust me right away, I would value the chance to earn that trust." Camila studied him, her doubts still present, but there was a distinct strength in Eduardo's determination that seemed different. Finally, he agreed. "Very well, But this does not change the nature of our connection, Eduardo. This small creature captures my full attention. To genuinely connect, one must showcase their dedication. As Eduardo journeyed home that evening, a mix of relief and apprehension enveloped him. He had taken a bold step, but he recognized that the toughest obstacles were still to come. He had to balance his responsibilities with Camila and the baby while trying to mend the frayed bond he had with Laura. His life, once carefully arranged, had turned into a chaos that he was forced to face with steadfast determination. The following days were heavy with discomfort. Eduardo, who had always been in control of every aspect of his life, now felt as though he was walking a tightrope. On one side, there stood the vow he had taken for Camila and their little one. On the other hand, every dialogue with Laura seemed to deepen the complexities of their relationship. She had forged a distance, opting to spend more time away from home and reducing any significant engagement. Eduardo decided to focus on his strengths. Realizing that simple words would not win Camila's trust, he decided to show his sincerity through his actions. One afternoon, after finishing his workday, he wandered by a shop that focused on baby items. He meandered through the hallways, an unspoken determination propelling him forward, despite his lack of clarity about his destination. After a short discussion with his secretary for advice, he decided to buy a crib, some clothing, diapers, and a variety of toys. In the shadows of darkness, he loaded the car with the parcels and drove towards the humble apartment that Camila referred to as home. As he climbed the stairs with the bags in his hands, an odd nervousness enveloped him, echoing the feelings just before a crucial job interview. He knocked on the door and hesitated, a sense of expectation lingering in the atmosphere. Camila's face brightened with astonishment, yet her demeanor changed to one of wariness as she observed Eduardo weighed down by packages. "What are you working on?" she asked, her arms folded tightly across her chest. He responded, unveiling the bags, "I brought a few items for the baby. I recognize that there's still a bit of time remaining, but I believe it could be wise to start getting ready. I am eager to help you, Camila." She looked at him for what seemed like forever, trying to decipher his real motives. Finally, she stepped aside to grant him access. Eduardo placed the bags in a corner of the inviting living room and took a moment to observe his surroundings. The atmosphere was simple yet neat and welcoming. It was clear that Camila was exerting her highest level of dedication with the tools at her disposal. "It's quite a lot," she finally said, looking at the bags with a mix of admiration and doubt. "This action was not required on your part." "I see your point," Eduardo responded sincerely, "but I am resolute in my decision to proceed. Though the past cannot be changed, Camila, I stand by you and the baby in this present moment." Camila let out a long breath and settled into the sofa, her eyes softening as the tension began to fade. "This stays the same, Eduardo. Though my trust in you may be limited, I still value your efforts. This will prove to be immensely advantageous." Eduardo nodded, accepting his answer with a quiet resolve, showing no inclination to delve deeper. He recognized that gaining his trust would require time, and he was ready to embrace patience. Following a few minutes of charged quiet, Eduardo resolved to leave. "If you need help with anything, feel free to contact me anytime. Time holds no significance." Camila strolled alongside him to the door. Before leaving, he shot a quick look at him, a faint smile dancing on his lips. "Thank you, Eduardo." As he made his way along the road back home, a spark of hope kindled within Eduardo. Despite the numerous challenges ahead, he had at least taken the first step on his journey. Amidst the chaos enveloping him, that evening he allowed himself to entertain the idea that he was on the right path. Eduardo began to delve into Camila's universe and the preparations for the baby's impending arrival. Despite her emotional distance, he remained committed to providing his help. He devoted numerous afternoons to her, meticulously putting together the crib he had bought, organizing the little clothes, and making certain that everything was perfectly arranged. Every gesture, every shared moment, showcased Eduardo's resolve to prove his dedication this time. Still, his bond with Laura continued to fray. She rarely participated in dialogue with him and preferred to spend her evenings outside, staying at a friend's residence. Eduardo recognized the necessity of addressing the situation, but every effort to connect with her resulted in tense interactions. Laura experienced anguish, and Eduardo understood the cause of her suffering. Amidst everything, his unwavering attention stayed on Camila and the baby. One afternoon, while he helped Camila with the final touches in the apartment, she watched him silently from the sofa. While Eduardo focused intently on arranging a delicate mobile above the crib, he momentarily missed the warmth of Camila's watchful eyes. Upon finishing his task, he cast a look her way and observed a glimmer in his eyes that had long been missing, a mixture of gratitude and perhaps a hint of respect. "You've changed," Camila said abruptly, breaking the stillness. Eduardo was struck by a profound sense of wonder at her words. "Is that how you see it?" he asked, a spark of hope shining through his voice. Camila nodded, her arms crossed with determination. "I can't quite tell if you're the same person I once married, but it's clear that this Eduardo is putting in the effort. That carries great importance." He took a seat next to her, allowing a moment to absorb the significance of what she had just said. "I sincerely wish for you to know that I deeply regret what happened earlier. Though I cannot change what has been done, I am here now, resolute in my commitment to not disappoint you again." Camila paused thoughtfully before she replied. She seemed to be grappling with her internal musings, her personal worries. Finally, her voice surfaced softly. "I don't expect that everything will be perfect. I just hope for your dependability. This small creature genuinely merits that." "I share that sentiment." Eduardo understood the weight of those words. He realized that there was still a lot to prove, but for the first time in months, he felt he was starting to build something with Camila, even if it wasn't a romantic bond. That evening, as he returned home, Eduardo found Laura waiting for him in the living room with a sense of calm anticipation. His expression was firm and unwavering, as if he had arrived at a decision that could no longer be postponed. "We need to have a conversation," she declared, her arms crossed in a bold stance. Eduardo exhaled slowly and took his place in front of her. He felt the unavoidable drawing near, and though it caused him anguish, he recognized that there was no way to stop its advance. "I can't go on like this," Laura declared, her voice firm yet overflowing with emotion. "I will not settle for being just a faint echo in your life. Focus on your son and Camila, while I pursue a different path altogether." Eduardo inhaled deeply, suppressing the constriction in his throat. "I understand, Laura, and I truly regret putting you in this position." She looked at him one last time, her face a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Wishing you the best in your endeavors, Eduardo. Take care of that little one." As Laura left, Eduardo felt a profound solitude, wrestling with a void in his heart, while also encountering a fresh clarity that had once slipped through his fingers. He recognized that, even in the wake of losing Laura, prioritizing his son and Camila was the right decision. He embraced the price of his previous mistakes, prepared to face it directly. After what seemed like an endless journey, he felt a glimmer of hope that he was finally heading in the right direction. The day came upon us sooner than expected. Eduardo was immersed in his work, meticulously examining a stack of documents when the phone abruptly interrupted the silence with its ringing. As he stared at the screen, he noticed Camila's name standing out. A tightness coiled within him as he replied. "Eduardo," she murmured, her voice fading into silence. "It's the small one. I find myself in the hospital." The words struck him like a bolt from the blue. Without a moment's pause, Eduardo left everything behind and sprinted away. As he journeyed to the hospital, a tempest of thoughts swirled through his mind. Disquiet, sensation, apprehension. He never imagined this moment would come so swiftly, but he recognized the importance of being there, of proving that his commitment was sincere. Upon his arrival at the hospital, he found Camila resting in a bed, her face pale but serene. A caregiver hovered nearby, carefully fine-tuning the array of monitors that encircled her. Eduardo advanced with purposeful strides, his heart racing within him. "How have you been faring?" he asked softly, tenderly holding his hand. "I'm fine," Camila said, a subtle smile gracing her lips. It appears he has advanced because of his eagerness to engage with you." They exchanged a soft chuckle, but Eduardo could feel the subtle tension hanging in the air. In the ensuing hours, he stayed nearby, making certain that every one of his needs was fulfilled. Despite the burden pressing heavily upon him, Eduardo stood firm, resolute in his determination. He was unwavering in his dedication to stand by her and her child. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the doctor entered the room and began the birthing process. Eduardo held Camila's hand tightly, murmuring encouraging words as she endured the intensity of each contraction. He had never encountered anything as deep, as authentic. It was a moment that would change him forever. The sharp cry of the baby resonated throughout the room, and in that instant, Eduardo felt as if time had frozen completely. As the doctor carefully placed the newborn in Camila's arms, Eduardo was engulfed by a wave of emotion, tears cascading down his cheeks. He was a child, fragile and beautiful, swathed in a small blanket that barely covered his little body. "It's stunning," Eduardo breathed, his eyes fixed on the baby in awe. "It is ours, our son." Camila looked at him, her expression a blend of exhaustion and profound satisfaction. "Absolutely, it is." The moments that followed were a tapestry of emotions. As Eduardo held the baby close, an incredible connection surrounded him, one he had never experienced before this moment. At that moment, everything else faded into insignificance. The mistakes of the past, the doubts, the worries. It was merely him, Camila, and the delicate new existence that had just made its debut in the world. As Camila reclined in her bed, yearning for the comfort of sleep, Eduardo nestled beside her, tenderly holding the baby in his embrace. With unwavering determination, he proclaimed, "I promise to be by your side. I promise to meet your expectations." Camila, weary yet composed, offered him a subtle smile. "I sincerely wish for that, Eduardo, for the well-being of this little one." That night, Eduardo felt the stirring of a new beginning in his life. He had experienced numerous losses, but in return, he had acquired something invaluable, the opportunity to grow, to craft something authentic and lasting, and he was resolute in his commitment to make the most of it. In the months after the baby's arrival, Eduardo found his life changed in ways he had never imagined. His routine, once dominated by long work hours and a flurry of meetings, now revolved around diapers, and the small but significant milestones of his son. In the face of adversity, every sacrifice took on a profound significance, especially during those fleeting moments when he saw his son smile or felt the comforting grip of his tiny hand in his own. Camila, however, had begun to see Eduardo in a new light. Despite his conscious attempt to remain emotionally detached, he could not ignore the genuine effort he was exerting. He was there for every medical consultation, each sleepless night, and every little moment that required patience and dedication. At times, he watched him interact with the baby, contemplating if this side of Eduardo had always been there, hidden beneath the relentless ambition that had created distance between them. On a bright afternoon in the park, Eduardo carefully nudged the small car, while Camila walked beside him. The sun radiated its warmth while the baby rested serenely under the sheltering branches of a tree. Eduardo broke the silence. "You know," he said, his eyes fixed intently on the path before him, "life has revealed itself in unexpected ways, and now it seems unimaginable to picture it differently." Camila studied him closely, weighing the sincerity in his voice. "You have undergone a remarkable transformation, Eduardo. Your dedication to our son is truly remarkable. Nonetheless, keep in mind that you are actively engaged in the act of bringing this to life. Restoring trust is not an instantaneous process." "Text, I see," he replied, a touch of feeling in his tone, "and I'm dedicated to progressing with this not solely for him but for you too. I want you to know that I am here for anything you need." Camila's smile was modest, yet it radiated authenticity. "You're achieving remarkable strides, Eduardo. Exceeded what I had anticipated." As time went on, the bond between them began to soften. Although their romantic relationship didn't reignite, they managed to create a balance that allowed them to coexist as parents and, in a way, as friends. Eduardo strived to uphold a sense of coherence, demonstrating through his deeds what simple words alone could not repair. One day, while I was playing with the baby in Camila's living room, the little one, already babbling, raised his arms toward Eduardo. "Father," he said, a mischievous smile lighting up his features. Eduardo felt a constriction in his throat, his heart racing intensely. It was the inaugural moment he heard that word slip from his son's lips. Camila looked deeply into his eyes, revealing a rich tapestry of emotions. A feeling of accomplishment, a hint of warmth, and a spark of optimism. He brought it up with a smile, hinting that there could be a hint of fondness involved. "I wish it could remain like this for eternity," Eduardo murmured, holding the baby tenderly in his embrace. "I promise to always stand by him." The family, once fragmented, was now finding its path together. It may not have been perfect, but it was heartfelt. For Eduardo, that was enough. He realized that true success was found not in his career or wealth, but in the connections he cultivated with the people he cherished most. This time, he was resolute in his commitment to persevere. Did this story of transformation and redemption strike a chord with you? Every decision we take holds the potential to change not only our own existence but also the lives of those we hold closest. If Eduardo's journey to fatherhood and reconciliation strikes a chord with you, kindly give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends, inviting them to reflect on the profound impact of change and the importance of family connections. If you appreciate stories filled with deep emotions and inspiring themes, make sure to subscribe to our channel to catch all our future videos. We are excited to discover more about you. From which country are you joining us? I invite you to express your opinions in the comments section. We would be thrilled to explore your creation.